Hello, everyone. Welcome back to AskPrep. Today, we are exploring two significant pillars of justice and human dignity in the Indian Constitution, Articles 23 and 24. In this video, we will cover Article 23, Introduction of Article 23, Text of Article 23, Understanding Prohibited Practices, Constitutional Provisions and Scope, Related Laws and Acts. Article 24. Introduction of Article 24. Text of Article 24. Historical context and need for Article 24. Key provisions of Article 24. Implementation and enforcement mechanisms. So let's start with the first point, introduction of Article 23. Article 23 is a fundamental right that protects individuals from exploitation, an essential aspect of India's commitment to human dignity and equality. It prohibits human trafficking, forced labor, and other exploitative practices, ensuring individuals are not compelled to work against their will. This article reflects India's dedication to social justice, targeting practices that historically disadvantaged communities. Enshrined under the right against exploitation, Article 23 establishes a legal foundation to combat these exploitative practices. Now let's talk about the second point, text of Article 23. Article 23 reads, "Traffic in human beings and begur and other similar forms of forced labor are prohibited, and any contravention of this provision shall be an offence punishable in accordance with law." It has two major parts. Prohibition of human trafficking, begur, compulsory work without payment, and forced labor. Empowerment of the state to create punitive measures against violations. This article extends its protections to both citizens and non-citizens alike. Through Article 23, the Constitution establishes a clear mandate against exploitation, emphasizing human dignity and autonomy as constitutional rights. Now let's talk about the third point, understanding prohibited practices. Human trafficking, the illegal trade and exploitation of individuals, primarily for forced labor or sexual exploitation. In India, this includes the trafficking of children, women, and marginalized groups. Forced labor, compulsory work without adequate remuneration or choice, includes bonded labor and child labor. Begur, a form of unpaid labor, is a prominent example, where individuals work without wages due to coercion. These practices violate personal liberty and dignity, posing significant societal and ethical concerns. Article 23 specifically addresses these practices to foster a society based on equality, fairness, and respect for all individuals. Now let's talk about the fourth point, constitutional provisions and scope. Article 23 is part of the right against exploitation, covering both citizens and non-citizens within Indian territory. It prohibits the state and individuals from enforcing or allowing exploitative labor. The scope includes any kind of forced labor or trafficking, extending to private and public sectors. The government has the authority to make laws to penalize any form of exploitation under this article. Article 23 is non-derogable, meaning its protections cannot be suspended even during national emergencies, reinforcing its fundamental nature. Now let's talk about the fifth point, related laws and acts. The Bonded Labor System Abolition Act 1976 eliminates all forms of bonded labor in India. The Immoral Traffic Prevention Act 1956 aims to prevent human trafficking and protect victims of forced labor and exploitation. The Child Labor Prohibition and Regulation Act 1986 prohibits child labor in hazardous industries, complementing Article 23's goals. Indian Penal Code sections various IPC sections penalize human trafficking, slavery, and forced labor. These laws strengthen the reach of Article 23, providing the government with legal tools to enforce anti-exploitation measures and protect individuals' rights. Now we will talk about Article 24. Let's start from the first point, introduction of Article 24. Article 24 protects children's rights by prohibiting their employment in hazardous environments. As a fundamental right, it emphasizes the need for child safety and aligns with India's commitment to a fair and just society. This article is part of the right against exploitation, aimed specifically at safeguarding children from harmful labor practices. The prohibition supports educational opportunities, aiming for a healthier childhood free from exploitation. Article 24 reflects the nation's values of equality and protection for vulnerable citizens, securing a safer future for children by legally prohibiting exploitative practices. Now let's talk about the second point, text of Article 24. Article 24 reads, "No child below the age of 14 years shall be employed to work in any factory or mine or engaged in any other hazardous employment." It categorically restricts child labor in settings that could endanger health or development. The article applies specifically to children under the age of 14, with a focus on dangerous and unsafe occupations. By setting a strict age limit, it ensures that children are protected from early employment in hazardous industries. This provision supports the broader objective of child welfare by prioritizing safety, education, and proper development for young citizens. Now let's talk about the third point, historical context and need for Article 24. Historically, child labor was a widespread issue in India, particularly in industries like agriculture, mining, and manufacturing. Economic hardships, lack of education, and poverty forced many children into hazardous work environments. Before Article 24, children were highly vulnerable to exploitation, as there were limited regulations safeguarding their rights. The need for Article 24 became evident to protect children's health, safety, and education opportunities. Article 24 addresses these concerns by prohibiting child labor in dangerous settings, helping to reduce child exploitation and promote long-term social and economic progress. Now let's talk about the fourth point, key provisions of Article 24. Article 24 prohibits the employment of children below 14 in factories, mines, or other hazardous occupations. The term hazardous covers industries involving chemicals, heavy machinery, mining, and any work that risks physical or mental health. While children are banned from hazardous industries, Article 24 does not prohibit all forms of child employment. This provision is focused on protecting children from work that could lead to physical, mental, or emotional harm. It reflects a balance between social welfare and economic needs, prioritizing child safety while allowing for their development through safer means. Now let's talk about the fifth point, implementation and enforcement mechanisms. Various laws support Article 24, including the Child Labor, Prohibition and Regulation Act, 1986, which specifically outlines banned occupations. The Juvenile Justice Act and amendments to the Right to Education Act also reinforce protections for children. Agencies like the Ministry of Labour and Employment oversee enforcement, working with NGOs and state governments. Central and state governments conduct regular inspections and impose penalties on industries violating Article 24's provisions. If you found this video informative, then write it down, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss more important videos in the future.